Hi, I'm Pauline Norstrom and welcome to the session today, which is on AI, facial recognition and ethics. So I'm representing the BSIA for this session, and what I'm going to cover is a little bit about myself, about the BSIA, and why the BSIA developed an ethical and legal guide to automated facial recognition, what's in the guide, the BSIA's alignment with government strategy, and the route forward to a British standard. I'm also going to talk about the increasing use of AI in the security process. So first, a little bit about me. So I'm the founder of and CEO of international strategic research and advisory firm, Anacantic Consulting, leading a team specialised in the ethical application of AI and high-risk applications in industries, security, video surveillance and critical national infrastructure. I'm also an AI ethics advisor to the UK government's digital catapult, the Machine Intelligence Garage, an advisory board member for the AI-based security intelligence company Archangel Imaging, and an AI advisor to the BSIA, the Institute of Directors, and the SIA in the US. I'm also a champion of best practice and ethics around a diverse range of technology, innovation, and commercializations for over 30 years. And speaking on behalf of the BSIA today, the way I work with the BSIA is that I'm an honorary member. I'm also their former chair. I'm a former video surveillance committee chair. I'm currently a member of the AI Automated Facial Recognition Special Interest Group, and I've worked with the association for over 20 years. A little bit about the BSIA. So this is a trade association for the professional security industry in the UK, and the members range in size from global companies to small and medium enterprises. More than 70% of privately provided UK security products and services in the UK are from BSIA member companies. Members manufacture, distribute and integrate electronic and physical security equipment and provide security intelligence, frontline officers and system design services. It is expert in fostering collaborative, domestic and international relationships, for example, with governments, with BSI, with Euralarm. It's also a founder member of COES, which is a European confederation, and there's strong engagement across a range of disciplines. BSIA leads the UK industry through government engagement and influence, representation of members, the creation of guidance, training and codes of practice from security monitoring, installation, through to privacy enhancing techniques in video surveillance. So on to the subject matter today. So why develop a guide to the ethical and legal use of automated facial recognition software? So why the guide? So AFR software is frequently in the public spotlight. There are many different applications and it can be highly beneficial if used correctly. However, there is scope for it to be misused in a way which may infringe upon human rights. There's a public concern that the technology, if used without proper control and transparency, we need to explain and show that its ethical use is in the hands of a responsible professional industry. We would like to build trust by leading the way and avoid a ban on the use of the technology. We want to champion best use through a straightforward, non-technical guide to its legal and ethical application. And the background to this is that there's been a great deal of focus from the media, human rights groups who raised valid concerns about a dystopian society. And there's still a proposed piece of UK legislation which has called for a total moratorium on the use of AFR in all public spaces, including retail and shopping centres. The case brought by human rights organisation Liberty versus South Wales Police was in the spotlight. The review and the judgment of that case identified a number of shortcomings, including the need for the assessment of bias in police watch lists, data protection impact assessments, challenge of the software developer to ask about bias, although no bias was actually found. The UK GDPR legislation is really difficult to navigate. There are no ethical standards guiding the applications, and the pandemic raised the awareness of contactless technologies, for example, AFR activated access control. The industry was concerned that AFR would be banned altogether, and this would be detrimental to ethical and valid uses in the private sector. So the BSIA anticipated the needs of the industry and created a guide to the legal and ethical use of AFR against a backdrop of uncertainty. It was a first of its kind, and it's a good example of industry leadership in uncertain times. So I'd like to walk you through the journey to the creation of the guide. This was teamwork. A team of member companies and specialists convened to discuss the issues. The BSIA team, Anaconda Consulting's team, FaceWatch, JCI, Optech, Secure One and Vigilance were all companies involved in creating the guide. And the journey started in 2019, where the discussions were around the table. And then by February, we started, and a working group was formed and work commenced. And during that time, the South Wales police judgment arose. So we did look at that and respond to it. So it took 6 months to create a document which went into a wide UK stakeholder consultation process and also went out internationally for feedback and consultation from other regions, resulting in the guide being released in February 2021. And the key areas addressed in the guide: first and foremost, a robust process for the needs assessment. And the guide actually walks through a series of steps which lead to the decision, which is it ethical, legal and safe to deploy AFR in the context? And that includes looking at why it's needed, to define where it will be used, to define the purpose of its use, to undertake an ethical assessment, the relevant data protection impact assessments to mitigate the risks that arise from that, and to ensure necessity and proportionality. Looking at the ethical principles underpinning the guide, we looked to the highest possible level to include in the guide, and that was the OECD guidelines combined with the European guidelines on AI. And those cover the need for human agency and oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, diversity, non-discrimination and fairness, societal and environmental well-being, and accountability. And the legal framework is drawn from the UK GDPR and UK's ICO framework for privacy and data protection impact assessments. And what you see from this virtuous wheel on the right is that it all starts with consent of the individual, that there should not be discrimination, there should be a lawful basis, the use should be proportionate, and the use should be necessary. And the guide actually states that only if the ethical and legal principles are satisfied should the deployment go ahead. We cover very clear governance and compliance responsibilities, and those include accountability. And that's to ensure an individual or a group is nominated and held accountable for the ethical and legal compliance and operation of the system. We believe that should firmly sit with the board of an organisation, ensuring that there is an ethical and lawful basis for processing under UK GDPR, for example, the consent and the legitimate interest, to ensure the security and integrity of the data is protected based on the risk of processing. Under responsibility, we talk about ensuring individuals and processing systems have defined and documented responsibilities and appropriate authorization levels, to ensure policies are shared with and approved at a strategic or board level, to ensure all processing activities are defined and documented. And then under the privacy and data protection aspects, to ensure data is actually made available for subject access requests, to ensure all data collected is necessary and proportionate and stored for an appropriate amount of time and in a transparent manner, to ensure a suitable data protection policy is available and published as appropriate. And again, to ensure there is a DPIA, the Data Protection Impact Assessment. We've also explained how it works, and basically AFR is an AI-based system which has been trained to detect and map facial features based on the learning from millions of images of faces. Bias is the biggest concern. And just like humans, AI becomes biased if only exposed to a narrow range of experiences. So we take that into consideration, and we actually encourage the challenge of the provider of the AFR to ask these questions. And we walk through the process of capture, how they're captured, generally from video surveillance images, that the facial map is created and a database of those facial maps is also created. Then there's a matching process, which is a comparison of the facial map against a video surveillance image. And then the decision made as to whether the face is authenticated by a human and whether any further action is required. We found that the most accurate AFR AIs have very low levels of bias and are generally trained using real and more so synthetic data to increase the range of the data, and have been tested by world-leading organisations such as NIST in the US. We've actually defined two very distinct use case scenarios. And this is very important under UK GDPR because the electronic processing of an image to create a facial map actually creates the biometric special category sensitive data defined in UK GDPR Article 9, where special rules apply. The EU plan to put in even tighter controls over live AFR. And here you can see on the left, we're trying to define, is it you? And that's verification. On the right, who is it? And that's identification. So looking at the is it you, the verification use case, we actually created a very useful flow diagram, which they say a picture paints 1,000 words. Well, this certainly does in terms of defining the video capture process and the process of matching, and then actually figuring out whether that person is authorized to be there or not. And this can be very useful in certain scenarios, such as managing the flow of individuals in a certain area, queuing to meet business levels, or gain authorized access to secure areas, for time and attendance, for safety purposes, for personal access to mobile phones and computers, online banking. And we've probably all seen it in border control, to get through the passport control quickly. And that allows fast and safe and valid passage of passengers entering or leaving the country. The controversial area of this technology use case is the identification, where we describe that as who is it? So the person isn't necessarily expected to be there in the scene, and we want to know who they are. And we attach much more strict guidelines to this particular section. Again, there's a very useful flow diagram which walks through the process of capture. But you may notice from this diagram that there's always a human in the loop in terms of making the final decision. And that's really important in terms of avoiding a situation where directly matched. And the way this technology used in this way is perhaps for border control again, but this time to identify persons who might be on a watch list, for use in private venues, maybe in shops and stadiums, where there's a need to control theft or antisocial behaviour, for law enforcement purposes to alert the presence of individuals of interest, and also for private security companies, for example, shopping centres, local authorities, to alert the presence of a repeat offender. And finally, we do cover privacy, storage and the reference database. And in this diagram, you're seeing some of the areas that we cover. So in terms of the database, what's its purpose? What's the quality control around that data? Are there adequate cybersecurity measures in place to protect it? SAR is the subject access request. So is it possible to provide data to somebody wanting to know if data is held about them? The data privacy aspect, this is focused really around the application and the data protection impact assessment. Is the use necessary and proportionate? Is there relevant signage there? Has there been consent? Is there privacy masking in place? And for storage and retention, the retention time is very important. It has to be defined, the storage has to be secure, and there need to be adequate data sharing agreements in place as well, if that were to occur between parties. So the guide was released at the beginning of 2021, and since then, there's been a lot of activity around this, because there was actually no guidance or legislation in this particular area when we started on this journey. And since then, the BSIA was invited to present evidence to the all-party parliamentary group for AI, and that's a group that examines a number of issues in relation to ethics and technology, AI and blockchain. And this particular group was looking at national security and the regulation of live facial recognition technologies, asking the question, should it be banned altogether? Because that moratorium is still on the agenda. And the use of live facial recognition technology to indiscriminately identify individuals is seen as a gross invasion of privacy, and it should be on the agenda. This needs to be managed correctly, and there needs to be the right governance in place and laws to support that. So the evidence presented by the BSIA doesn't disagree with any of that, actually, and encourages very specific regulation around this very specific usage. And we certainly feel that the BSIA guide, if it was used by the police, it would go a long way towards ethical and legal implementations. Now, this evidence is very important because it's actually embodied in a parliamentary brief, which has been documented alongside the other contributors, and embodied in a parliamentary brief, which informs the government and guides towards the right outcome for the public, which balances the national security needs with the privacy concerns of individuals. The guide's actually also been published by the Home Office, so you can find it on the government website as well, and there's a useful link in there for you. So the journey for this guide actually hasn't finished. It is actually heading to become a British standard, and that work has already started in the British Standards Institute. It will be developed by a committee of specialists and stakeholders. The committee is actually chaired by the BSIA, who brought it to the BSI, and will be managed by the BSI. Now, standards are a vital part of ensuring consistent governance of the use of technology in any industry. And this is the first of its kind in this sector, the security sector, and will lead companies and providers to work on a single framework of ethics and best practice in the deployment of what can be a controversial technology if it's used in the wrong way. If a standard exists, companies can be held to account to conform with the requirements, to be certified as compliant in the future, and provide vital reassurance to the user, the provider, and the public that the technology is being used in an ethical, legal, and safe way. Standards actually underpin legislation, although the legislation governing the specific use of AFR in video surveillance in the security domain is yet to be created. When this happens, the British standard will be at the heart of it. So following on from here, I wanted to tell you a little bit about AI in video surveillance and critical national security and infrastructure. Now, I've heard this quite a lot actually recently. So artificial intelligence in this industry, that's not new. And they're actually right. It's been around quite a long time. And it really does depend on what technologies are classified as AI. There's been a reorganization of all different types of technologies that automate, and they now sit under AI. But is this AI artificial general intelligence, or is it artificial narrow intelligence? They are different. Generally in security, the processes form artificial narrow intelligence, and that is AI that's designed to perform specific tasks to solve a very specific problem. But the concept of AI has been around for a very long time, for over 50 years. Its early beginnings root back to Alan Turing and the Turing test. And there's been a roller coaster of development, and then, a few stops along the way, and what was known as the AI winter, when nothing really happened at all. And that was down to the lack of general purpose technologies such as processing power and storage that were needed to evolve this technology. And AIs, and I say that in the plural because there are lots of different types, have gone through the hype cycle and the trough of disillusionment, hype that we've got this wonderful thing that's going to work and it's going to change the world, to finding it doesn't really work that well, because when you put it out in the field, it encounters lots of new things that it's not trained to do. But some AIs are now on the slope of enlightenment, where the product has actually been used effectively in a commercial setting. Now, the security industry was one of the early pioneers in automation and machine learning techniques, which categorize the most difficult forms of unstructured data, and that's video data. And after much failure and practice, over 20 years, in fact, AI is now on the slope of enlightenment. The concepts aren't new, but the applications are. And the technology now works, and it's becoming trusted as assistive to humans, which can be relied upon in critical processes such as security intelligence. So I mentioned artificial general intelligence, which is otherwise sometimes referred to as the singularity. And what this means in simple terms is whether AI can think for itself. This means figuring out what to do with no human input. But now even the most sophisticated neural networks, such as natural language processing, need to be guided they need some sort of input. The reinforcement algorithms, those that learn how to play games, need to be told what the goal of the exercise actually is. Otherwise, it doesn't know what to do. And AI doesn't really innovate yet, but it does a good job of predicting outcomes, historical reference points, and the really lightning fast reevaluation of evolving situations, which is perfect and critical in security. It can process fast and assist humans in a way which improves many aspects of society. And facial recognition software is an AI-based technology, an example of fast processing which assists the human as long as ethical, legal, and human in the loop review is used when appropriate. So from here, AI today to machines running the world, should we actually be scared? It's a question I'm asked really frequently, actually. But AI still doesn't know what it feels like to see the colour red. And that is a key human quality. So until that happens, I don't think we need to be scared. And the singularity, so this ability to think, could become a facsimile of the human consciousness, in fact. But until we've discovered what consciousness actually is and how it works, AGI, artificial general intelligence, really is a way off. And that discovery is rooted somewhere in the intersection between philosophy and neuroscience. Hasn't been discovered yet. In the meantime, AI-based technologies are improving lives, for example, in the medical field, in biotech, and certainly in security intelligence. But the benefits of AI must be aligned with ethical developments, which must keep AI in check. And right now, if we're to be scared of anything about AI, it's actually the amount of data collected and used without our consent. For example, fairly invasive social media and search engines, which may tend to influence and narrow our thinking and independence. That's what we really need to be scared of, because we won't be aware that that's happening necessarily. But ethics in AI is now one of the most discussed topics in the field of innovation. Standardization is on the horizon, and new AI developers are encouraged to challenge their designs and ensure they can do no harm. So finally, putting ethics into practice. So if you recognize that you need an AI policy in your organization because you are implementing contactless access control, enhancing security, maybe looking for missing persons or finding terrorists, the BSIA's guide provides the foundational framework. When this is a standard, there will be a de facto measurable framework which provides reassurance that the AFR has been implemented in an ethical and legal way. This will in turn build trust due to the governance and transparency that arises. And through challenge and feedback, ensure that the most concerning ethical issue of bias learned from historical data and narrow human is corrected. If you'd like to learn more about the BSIA, there's some information at the bottom of this slide, together with a link to Anna Cantor Consulting. So that's it from me. Thank you very much indeed.